In this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the best team in the AHL, the Capitals AHL affiliate 2023 Calder Cup champion Hershey Bears. How are they getting it done, and which players are primed to help out the Capitals? We'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. I would love to talk Capitals hockey with you one-on-one, and we can do that on subtext. Just check the show description for more details. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Capitals. Are they going to be sellers at the trade deadline on March 8th? And what will that mean for the Capitals? What players on the Hershey Bears can get called up and get their opportunity on the team? We'll talk about that in the show. A little bit later, we will talk about the players themselves that are getting it done in Hershey and which players are primed for a big break. But just to get it going here, we will talk about the Hershey Bears and their rich history of success. In today's episode, we have Corey Swartz, Hershey Bears Nation. Corey, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me. Excited to be able to chat Hershey Bears hockey, as always.
It is quite something as we take a look at the Hershey Bears. The Capitals necessarily aren't, getting the season that they are looking for, but the Hershey Bears are killing it. They have the best record in all of the AHL. Hershey Bears, the number one team in the AHL, 37-9, 76 points. Number one in the Atlantic. You're a guy that covers this team. How are the Hershey Bears getting it done?
Well, they're getting contributions from up and down their lineup, really. I mean, it's not been, you have some players like the Mike Scarbosas who, the Bears do miss dearly right now as he's up with the Capitals. But it's been, essentially a different line every game that's been kind of getting it done. This past weekend, we saw it in Providence with the line of Joe Snively, Alex Limoges, and Hendrix Lapierre kind of getting it done in terms of finding the scoring there. Other nights it's been the Bears top line. You got your Ethen Franks, your Joe Snively's, your, Pierrick Dubes, or, the players that immediately come to mind when you think of scoring goals. But you even look beyond it, depth guys. Jimmy Huntington's been fantastic this season. We look at some of the guys the Bears have kind of rounded their roster off with here. Bogdan Trineev's been pretty good here of late. Just a lot of guys stepping up, and that's kind of been separates the good teams from the average ones, right? When you're getting those contributions from all over your lineup, not necessarily just those top guys who, you get to look at the nice stat lines for sure.
Yeah, it's most impressive. And as we take a look at the Hershey Bears, they are no strangers to success, as we know. They won the Calder Cup last season, and they have just a long history of success. The Hershey Bears qualified for the playoffs in 14 of the last 16 seasons. The Bears, the AHL's oldest and most decorated team, the decorated franchise. So talking about the Hershey Bears, historically, they've always been really good. I've heard some knocks that the ticket prices are quite expensive in Hershey, being that they're playing very well right now. But talk to me about the history, and what is it about the Hershey Bears that just has a successful team year after year?
Well, it's a combination of a lot of factors. The Washington Capitals have always been very good at developing and finding prospects. In areas, unconventional areas outside of the draft. Even you look at guys like Joe Snively, Clay Stevenson. There's a good mixture of guys that have been scouted well by the Capitals, as well as the Bears and the Caps. Really do their homework on a lot of guys, and they happen to have a good habit of finding good people as well as great hockey players. And that kind of matrix, I think, just goes a long way towards building teams and players that, find success. They find camaraderie and, just a lot of different, those kind of intangible elements. You look at guys like, head coach Todd Nelson, for instance, who was a great find a couple of summers ago, just some really great elements. And it's just, historically, it's just gelled together. Well, you look at teams like the 2016 team, for instance, that, made a kind of surprising run to the Calder Cup finals. That was just pure, just willpower and gelling by that group that got them that far. It was nice to finally get that reward of, seeing them hoist the Calder Cup after so many years of kind of falling short and, not being able to perhaps compete for that in some ways. But, this team's just, they just have this intangible effort. It's almost hard to describe. It's a little bit of a Hershey magic in a sense where, they're able to take, by and large, we just saw it with the affiliation extension where, the Caps and the Bears have just had this tremendous partnership and, wouldn't change it for the world. And I think that's why that they re-upped for, I think, the longest single extension in the affiliation's history, at least this current one here. It's just that, why fix what's clearly not broken by any stretch on both sides here, certainly.
Yeah, and taking a look at the team, and oftentimes I will reference the Hershey Bears, saying how well they're doing and what players on the Bears would be poised to, get a shot on the Capitals. And oftentimes I'll hear people say, well, that's the AHL. It's not the NHL. And I will, mention something that Braden Holtby said one time. He said the line between the NHL and the AHL is razor fine. And if we want to talk about historically what players have worked their way up through Hershey, this season, 16 former or current Bears have played for the Capitals, including Carlson, Wilson, Protas, McMichael, Abe-Kubel, Beck, Mallenstein, Faravari, Milano, Lapierre, Alex Alexiev, Shepard, Haman Octel, Lucas Johansson, Ivan Miroshnichenko, Joe Snively, and Dylan McElrath. So to say that, it's not a league that has a lot of successful players. A lot of Capitals players and former Capitals players have made their stop through Hershey. And I think that oftentimes that's forgotten, don't you think?
Oh, I completely agree with that. And, I do think that, the bar is set very high in Washington. I mean, we see what players like McMichael, like Protas had to go through, in terms of refining their game. McMichael's the guy that, I remember straight away when he came in that pandemic shortened season and he scored this fantastic buzzer beater that in overtime that got the Bears a big time win. And, you think to yourself, that kid's got raw talent, but he really had to, come back to Hershey last season with a good attitude, work and, ultimately scored a huge goal in Game 7 of the Calder Cup finals among several, key goals that he had that season and that spring. It always impresses me with Washington because it's not just a given. It's not, okay, you paid your dues in the AHL and, here you are type of thing. It truly is a pivotal stepping stone, but a place where you can really kind of cut out a niche for your success at the top level here. So it's certainly like, you said with Holtby, it's a razor thin line, but it's still something you really have to persevere and earn. It's never something, as a former Bears head coach Troy Mann always said, you have to earn it. It's never given to you.
And it's not even just players, it's coaches as well. As we take a look at current Capitals head coach Spencer Carberry as well. Capitals head coach Spencer Carberry served as head coach of the Bears for 3 seasons from 2018 to 2021. Under Carberry, Hershey posted a combined record of 104, 59, and 8, a .658 point percentage, including an AHL's best 24-7-2-0 record. So, one of the things that is helping Spencer Carberry is he has a history. He has a rapport. He coached some of the players. What are some of your memories of Spencer Carberry as the head coach in Hershey?
Carbs is just a fierce competitor. I mean, there's so many games, whether the Bears lost, even when the Bears won, where, Carberry was very honest about his team's play. I still remember one game in that pandemic shortened season, where the Bears won this game and Carberry came out and he totally, said this effort was not good enough. I'm the exact lines he used are not coming to my mind right now, but it was a fantastic example of him not being satisfied with just getting 2 points. He wanted to make sure his team was playing the right way and wake them up because they weren't. And, we saw it a lot of times. I think back to his first season with the Bears where, kind of like his first season here with the Capitals, it maybe didn't gel right away type of thing. But he is a guy that he's so laser focused on kind of, that process. And, he understands that there's going to be some bumps and in the road and, some struggles and, not everything's going to be 100%. And, he understands from, being a hard-nosed player to, rising through these ranks through coaching in the ECHL, the AHL, now the NHL, what it takes to be successful in so many different situations. So I love seeing his, his honesty on the Capitals, in their post games and, as far as sharing updates, it's a great thing to see him make it. And like you said, there's a lot of people up there, Scott Allen. I say it every time I see, them interview Scotty on the bench, on Capitals broadcast, where I'm like, man, it's like a reunion almost. It's a lot of pleasant memories of, picturing those guys in the Hershey Bears media room after games, talking after games and such. So it's really great to see, not only that successful player record, but a lot of those successful coaches. So much of the Capital staff is now ex-Hershey members, and that's great to see.
And not only that, but you take a look at the head coach, and I don't think that head coach Todd Nelson gets enough credit either. And you got to think at a certain point that there's going to be a lot of NHL teams knocking on his door, but he's no stranger to the coaching the NHL. He had stops in Edmonton, also with the Atlanta Thrashers, and most recently with Dallas. As a Bears fan, are you concerned that there is going to be someone that's going to pluck Todd Nelson out of Hershey? Running the best team in all of the AHL. That's quite a resume he's got going.
It almost feels inevitable in a certain sense. I've talked to, a number of Bears fans that say we just have to appreciate this guy while he's here type of thing. It's only a matter of time. I mean, like you said, the successful record and, everything that he's achieved during, a very short stint here in Hershey kind of speaks for itself that, he, has that ability. I mean, back-to-back All-Star appearances, lifting the Calder Cup. I mean, it's been a tremendous partnership. And, obviously Nelly deflects credit basically every time he's, any individual accolades are, tossed his way. He'll defer to, guys like Nick Bootland and Patrick Weller, his assistants. The trio of them are all ex-Hershey players who spent time in Hershey, in their playing careers, which is, another fantastic nod to the rich history of the Bears in a lot of ways. But, with all those guys, we just really have to learn, to appreciate them. And, there will truly be a time, it's coming sooner rather than later, as we're probably going to touch on here, that a lot of these guys are either going to, graduate onto Washington, they're going to garner interest from other teams. It's not going to be, as great as this season's been. It has a shelf life, unfortunately. It's just the nature of the beast at the AHL level. So appreciate it for what it is and what we have. And we just hope that, it sticks around long enough to have another deep playoff run this spring, hopefully.
And I think that's something that Capitals fans need to do, is appreciate the AHL Hershey Bears. That is where a lot of the players, that's where they get their start, and future Capitals players as well. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about what players are call-up worthy. Listen, the Capitals have struggled this season, and the Hershey Bears are killing it. What players are primed for more? I'll discuss next. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Listen, sometimes you're watching a game and you're not that excited. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. It makes watching the game that much more exciting. Bet on all your favorite NBA players with quick bets, live same-game parlays, and exclusive props and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now you can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find the Locked On Sports Today channel now on Amazon Fire TV. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, we have Corey Swartz on the show as we are talking Hershey Bears hockey. We're talking Capitals hockey and, what players in Hershey are ready for their break, which ones are primed for more. And one of the things that I've railed on all season is that the Capitals were struggling with scoring 5-on-5. They were struggling with scoring goals, but there are some players in Hershey that can score goals on the regular. Who am I talking about? In particular, Pierrick Dube, number 2 in all of the AHL. In 48 games played, 24 goals, 9 assists. You got to think that a player like Dube would be pretty good on the Capitals. Tell me a little bit about him, and do you see a potential for him on the big team, and where does he fit in Hershey?
Yeah, Pierrick Dube has been a fantastic find by the Washington Capitals and, by extension, the Hershey Bears here. He's fantastic. I mean, the fact that he was not an all-star only speaks to, number one, the depth on the Bears team as it is, that a guy like Ethen Frank was kind of, was down between the two of them, I believe, really. But he's been fantastic. He's been a guy that the Bears have been able to employ in a lot of different situations. He's got a world-class shot. I would tell you that much. I mean, this is a guy that, if you give him even a little bit of space in the right setup on a power play, he does not need more than one opportunity to bury it. And, his shot is like a flash. I mean, it's on and off his stick. We've seen a lot of different plays where, the Bears employ a 5-forward system on their top power play unit. And when, you get guys like Alex Limoges and Mike Scarbosa who can, move the puck around quickly, and they, set up Dube for those quick shots. He's been fantastic. He's already shattered his previous goal count from his rookie season, as well as, I believe he just eclipsed his total point count here recently this past weekend. And for him, the only thing that I would, kind of caution with it, although he's young, he's got this great goal count to him. He's still very young, right? This is only his second full professional season. I think, he's nearing a high in terms of, total games played in a single season at the AHL. This is a guy that's, still very much getting kind of wet behind the ears. And although I believe a look at the NHL is certainly warranted, I do believe that, usage is perhaps the only thing that kind of concerns me. He's, a little bit of a smaller guy. We've seen the Capitals kind of shy away from using players like that. And, high usage situations. I mean, like, we take a look at a guy like Mike Scarbosa, who is a point per game player at the AHL level. I think is having a pretty good outing with the Capitals so far, despite a limited use of ice time, really. I think that's just what concerns me with Dube. Is this is a guy that kind of thrives with a, the bigger of a role he gets. Obviously, you could still throw him out in a power play, find him, watch him bury a shot type of thing. But I think the Capitals may just be, being a little bit cautious on, throwing him into one of those high pressure situations so fast, perhaps. I mean, it's a tough one to kind of estimate. Every time I, post a Pierrick Dube goal on Twitter, everyone's, first instinct is to say, where is he? Where is he not in the Capitals? That kind of gut reaction. So I see what's tantalizing about him, but I think the Capitals may be doing the right thing by letting him kind of dominate this season in Hershey. But as you mentioned, with Capitals, potentially being sellers, it's a guy that could get a look sooner rather than later, I believe.
And one of the things too is that the Capitals could view him as an asset. And I hate to say it out loud, but strike me down. But I mean, you could also view him as an asset for a trade. Listen, the Capitals will most likely be sellers at the deadline, and they do have assets on the big team, the Capitals, but they also have assets down in Hershey. And I know that that's not what the Hershey Bears fans would like to hear, but it's all about helping the Capitals, the big team, get a lot bigger. So if they have to move a big piece out, whether it's in Washington or in Hershey, those are tough questions. But your assessment is that he still needs a little bit more time to marinate down in Hershey. And I've heard about that as well. So another player that we'll talk about, and, quite familiar as he's a very fast guy. He's got a need for speed, is Ethen Frank, as we know in the All-Star Skills competition, that in the second year in a row, the fastest skater. 47 games played, 21 goals, 14 assists, but there's trouble when it comes to Ethen Frank as he was injured here recently. Talk to me about Ethen Frank, how fast he is, how that helps him in Hershey, and give me the latest on his injury.
Yeah, Ethen Frank's been fantastic. I mean, I don't think this gets enough credit that he was still faster than Connor McMichael's time, or McDavid's time, I should
Yeah.
say. In the comparing the two All-Star events, and that's with 2 games played. 3 games in 4 nights, I believe, actually, and a cross-country flight over to California and San Jose to boot with that. So incredibly impressive how these guys can get up for these kinds of things like that. But yes, he was injured in Hershey's win on Friday in Providence. Very early on, he went, down in a collision with Providence forward Justin Brazeau. Trying to counter Brazeau driving to the net in front of Clay, or I believe Hunter Shepard for that game. And, just happened to kind of land funny on his right leg. And he got up, didn't put much weight on it. It seemed to get a little bit better. He was able to kind of get off the ice and go down the tunnel under his own power, but actually tried to come back. He, jumped out and took a lap with the team when they came out for the start of the second period. But, fairly early on in the lap, you can kind of see that, nope, it's not going to happen today type of thing. It was deemed a lower body injury. He did not play in Hershey's game on Saturday. I know they were waiting to reevaluate him before, kind of speculating any further once they got back in from their trip here. So, fingers crossed we'll maybe get a better update on him, this week when they're practicing here. The Bears have off for basically an entire week until they head up to Toronto this coming Saturday afternoon. So hopefully that, little bit of a return attempt there is a positive sign that, maybe with a week's rest, maybe he'll be able to go. It was about this time last year that he got hurt, similarly. I believe that was an upper body injury. So we're kind of hoping with him that he's not going to miss significant time. And it doesn't seem like it, but, obviously save that official word for, from the team here, certainly. So, the Bears are just a different team with him and Mike Scarbosa in the lineup. I mean, they're 2 key cogs on the power play for very good reason. Very much missing those 2 guys. It was evident in Hershey's, 9th loss of the season on Saturday in Springfield, in which, they, played well enough, I think, to win, but, they had a couple of gaffes of, uncharacteristically average second period that kind of cost them there. So love Ethen Frank. He's been, in my opinion, better than his rookie season, even though he's, maybe got to push a little bit once he gets back to try to hit that 30 goal mark again. But fantastic sophomore season. He's a guy that I'd love to see get a chance, maybe the next man up possibly for the Washington Capitals, just because I think he's been that good. And, maybe they're sleeping on him a little bit here, that as again, another smaller guy that maybe doesn't fit the prototypical mold of what the Capitals wants. I think he could bring it. I think he could be a key, player for them in a lot of different situations. Maybe add another dimension with his speed here, certainly.
Yeah, the Capitals have had a hard go with it with the smaller guys. If you take a look at Matthew Phillips in particular, in the beginning of the season, everyone said, well, he's good at generating chances, but ultimately his size has been drawn into focus, getting pushed off the puck, that kind of thing. A tough break for some of the smaller players in the league. Another player we were talking about is Scarbosa, and thank you very much for Scarbosa, as he is killing it for the Capitals, playing between Pacioretty and Tom Wilson. He's a guy that's no stranger to the AHL. He's no stranger to the NHL. I like Sgarbosa's game. He is one of the players I spoke about as well. And what is key for him, what kind of pushed him over Ethen Frank, what kind of pushed him over Dube, is that he's a center. And that's what the Capitals were looking for. Some people said, well, why didn't they go with Hendrix Lapierre? You take a look at it. He's had flashes of greatness, but I don't know what the long-term plans are for Hendrix Lapierre. He's another piece that I wouldn't be too surprised if they moved at some point. So talk to me about the importance of Sgarbosa, and do you think that Hendrix Lapierre has a future in the NHL? It seems like he thrives in the AHL. He's one of those players that left the Calder Cup, winning the Calder Cup with that swagger. A lot of those guys went in as boys and left as men. Just totally changed players. You take a look at Malenstein, Connor McMichael, who is just killing it. I love that. So talk to me about that. Sgarbosa, talk to me about Hendrix Lapierre. What do you know?
I think it was a very calculated move by the Capitals to bring up Sgarbosa as in place of Lapierre in this case. Not only has Sgarbosa earned the look, certainly with the remarkable season that he's had with Hershey, but it's a Spencer Carberry effect. I remarked to someone I know about this, recently. It's kind of a surprise this hasn't happened sooner with Sgarbosa. Carberry spoke at length about, how familiar he is with Sgarbosa. They have been intertwined with their time in Hershey. I mean, Sgarbosa's first year was, also Spencer Carberry's first year in Hershey back in the 2018-19 season. And, their success, kind of went hand in hand with each other. Sgarbosa was such a key cog for the Bears over his tenure here. And, so much of that stretches over. And, Carberry kind of mentioned it, and I thought it was kind of an interesting point that they want Lapierre to kind of have a bigger role in Hershey here with this opportunity, to have him employed in a few different situations. And a few of what I've noticed to be Sgarbosa's roles. Lapierre's been moved up to be the number one center on the power play unit. He's taken on a nice line, I would say, with Alex Limoges and Joe Snively, that they've been very productive since, being formed together. They had 2 points in Hershey's last game before the All-Star break, came back with, both the goals against the goaltender. The Bears came off of the Bears sticks in their win over Providence on Friday. I think they're just looking for him to take that next step. We saw last season where Todd Nelson benched Hendrix Lapierre during a trip to Charlotte to have him watch, and that was very instrumental to getting Lapierre on track here. Again, this is a young kid who, it's hard to believe, like you said, they kind of went in that playoff series as kids and emerged as men type of thing. It's impressive to note that, Lapierre is still very young. It's only his second full, season down in Hershey here type of thing. It's been great that he's gotten a look and had some, good success in spurts with Washington. But I do think that, you want to give a veteran guy like Sgarbosa a chance, especially with the need, as you said, a center on a higher role here, third line center with Evgeny Kuznetsov out for the foreseeable future. Wish him the best of, time with, getting back, to where he needs to be type of thing. I think it's good to let a proven guy. Obviously, Sgarbosa has played very limited minutes so far as I've been able to see with Washington, but he's chipped in points as he so often does. And I think that's all you can really hope for with this kind of role, is to get a little bit more out of your depth guys like Sgarbosa, who've historically been recalled just to be an extra body at times, and he's very capable. He's obviously on pace to shatter his AHL best. This derails it a little bit, so be it. He deserves that opportunity. And, it's a great reward for him for, being a really good trooper here in Hershey. He's a guy that was not easy to replace for the large stretch of that Calder Cup run. It's easy to forget that the Bears were without Sgarbosa for the, latter 3 rounds, really, without Sgarbosa. So, he's been great. He totally deserves the look. I do hope that if the Capitals are sellers, they're not heavy sellers, at least in terms of their assets in Hershey, to be able to let this group take another crack at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a pleasant surprise. I guess I'm not surprised, but sometimes it doesn't always translate between the AHL and the NHL. But with Sgarbosa, he's got the history, he's got the pedigree. I think it was the right decision. All right, so coming up here after the break, the Capitals as sellers. What does that mean for some of the young talent in Hershey? We'll discuss coming up. It's the halfway point of the season, and let's face it, Capitals fans, it's been an up and down season. Regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our #1 choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And let me tell you something, guys. I was not the kind of guy that was that into fantasy sports until I found Sleeper, and now I love it. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Capitals fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy sports with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your pick so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, we have Corey Swartz on the show, and we're talking Hershey Bears, we're talking Capitals, and it is an interesting position for the Capitals, as it does appear, and, you know, they had a good weekend, all things considered. They took down the Bruins. Who saw that coming? Not me. And the Canucks game was close, but have the fortunes changed for this team? The Capitals sit 6 points out of a playoff spot. And one of the things that Brian McClellan says, he says, you know, it's going to be difficult decisions that we need to make. However, whatever we do in the second half, if we do trade away players, you can expect a lot of players from Hershey to come up. And we take a look at the Capitals. It's the Carolina Hurricanes, the New York Islanders, and the Washington Capitals are the 3 oldest teams after the Penguins. So this would be a good time for a youth infusion. See what these young guys have in the tank. But what does that mean for the young prospects of even Miroshnichenko, Hendrix Lapierre, Ethen Frank, Pierrick Dube, Vincent Iorio, Clay Stevenson, who very well might see some time on the big team depending on what direction the team goes in, writes Sammy Silver on that particular one. And it is interesting about Clay Stevenson, as it has been said, that Charlie Lindgren, Chucky Sideburns, the Outlaw, could be on the move. And that could be a good opportunity for Clay Stevenson, who is the #1 netminder in all of the AHL. Can you believe that? And then also Hunter Shepard, #2. So Clay Stevenson 1, Hunter Shepard #2. Really great options. How concerned are you about the prospect of the Capitals being sellers and maybe kind of depleting a lot of the players that currently sit in Hershey?
I'd be very concerned about it. Obviously, you know, the Bears have the ultimate goal of, you know, saying, okay, as long as these players are all made eligible to return to Hershey, you know, provided the Capitals, you know, don't make a tremendous run to, you know, make it back to the playoffs. Stranger things have happened. It's not ruled out completely. I don't see the Capitals maybe necessarily being complete sellers at this point. That's the only thing I kind of hold on to, is that, you know, we haven't seen quite as many deals involving lots of prospects for the Capitals in, you know, at least this season and in recent seasons where they've dealt, you know, these big packages of players and draft picks. It usually seems to, you know, fall within exchanges type of thing. I do see the Capitals perhaps maybe trying to settle into some, you know, future assets type of things, like maybe trading for draft picks for, you know, teams looking for rentals. I just don't see them being full out sellers under, you know, in the Ovechkin era in a lot of ways. You know, it still kind of is a foreign concept to me. I'm open to being wrong about that, of course, but I would hope that the Capitals don't necessarily try to sell. You know, I like to think it's going to be a deal that's going to make sense most of all type of thing. This isn't going to be a, you know, let's trade this guy, that guy. You know, we've seen so many names thrown around. You mentioned Lindgren, Nick Dowd's another one that I see a lot. Max Pacioretty is another one. You know, you see tossed around a little bit. I think it'd be great to, you know, get these guys some looks, but I would really hope the Capitals necessarily don't sell the farm exactly, just because, you know, obviously I'm a little bit selfish. I am a Bears fan first, after all. I would hate to see too many of these guys, you know, get traded away, you know, in a, you know, bit of a lost season for the Capitals, of course, but can't rule out that possibility, of course. But I would like to see the Capitals use their assets, not just view them as trade chips. Pierrick Dube is a guy that, comes to mind instantly. He's a guy that the Capitals, stole, I hate to say it any other way, from the Montreal Canadiens, who had every opportunity to sign him. He was on an AHL contract with the Laval Rocket last season, did pretty darn well, 16 goals, 16 assists, a guy that, you really should have bought into, and the Capitals kind of swept their way in and, were able to, steal that. I keep using the word steal, but it's the only thing that comes to mind when I think of him. And, they've been able to really get some diamonds in the rough here, I think. So I would think it'd be foolhardy for the Capitals to maybe dismiss those and do anything other than give them, looks. And I'd really like to see the Bears, by extension for the Bears, I'd like to see some guys step up a little bit more. I mean, this is a great period right now for some guys to step up. Ethen Miroshnichenko is just one of those players where he's had a few assists, but he's been pretty quiet on the score sheet. And as a guy that's, I think a noted scorer, will grow into a noted goal scorer. I'd love to see him take the next step here and start, helping the Bears in the absence of Frank and Scarbosa. There's some guys I think that have more to give. Bogdan Trinyev's another guy who has been really good this season in flashes, and his 200-foot game I think has really improved. He's kind of a physical player, a guy that's not afraid to mix it up from time to time. And even some younger guys who, like Ryan Hofer, who haven't had the opportunity to be a full-time Bear just yet, to step in and continue to move this in the right direction. It's just such a great atmosphere for some of these young guys. I just love to see some of them take this next step forward. And if that's the case long term, towards the end of the season, maybe with some guys up, it's only to their benefit, I think, to try to, help push this Bears team. But I do think if you're watching, you have to be mindful of that playoff experience that guys like McMichael, Protas, Mallenstein, we mentioned earlier, had in Hershey. And, that is almost, in a sense, more valuable in a lot of ways than any assets they may be able to give up if they can get those guys that championship experience.
Listen, Corey, I want to thank you for joining us on this edition of Locked On Capitals. You are on the Bears Hockey Nation. Tell us a little bit about your website. It's a blog that covers the Hershey Bears, and it's always a wealth of knowledge. I try to keep my fingers on the pulse for the Hershey Bears, but if I ever have any questions about what's going on down in Hershey, it's always a great resource. Tell us a little bit about your website.
Yeah, so obviously you can follow me down below there at CSWA11. That's kind of where my miscellaneous thoughts and things get posted at in a lot of ways. But my Bears handle is at HBH Nation blog on Twitter. I've been running it for, since I think the opening stages of the 2016-17 season. So it's been a little while. But I split my coverage there. On the Twitter page is the main one to follow, as well as you can find on Facebook and Instagram. That's where the articles go. I post between the blog as well as the site that I write for, the Calder Times. So you can feel free to check them out for all your coverage for the AHL. We have a lot of writers for a lot of teams there, including a lot of Atlantic Division coverage, if ever you're interested in any of Hershey's rivals there. But a lot of the game content, recaps, player features go there. I like to, double with the content there in terms of the day-to-day on the blog page as well. So if you follow the Twitter page, the Facebook page, you'll get every article that I write directly into your feed, setting the stage for what's to come with all the updates and all that good stuff. So spread out a little bit there, but those two pages are the ones to follow for sure.
All right, Corey Swartz, thanks for your time, and always worth a follow. So if you're wanting to keep up on the Hershey Bears, give him a follow. And when you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel. Find the Locked On Sports Today channel now on Amazon Fire TV. It is truly everywhere. Listen, I want to thank you once again for joining us on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.